Welcome to another episode of the Business Academy podcast. I am Quentin Terpstra, and I am here with Dr. Gary Rademacher. And today we wanted to go over some data and a survey that was actually quite concerning. I have a copy here of Chiropractic Economics, their issue from May 19th. And, they do a survey every year of the chiropractic profession. And I think they surveyed 400 chiropractors in this survey. And what I specifically wanted to go over was something here was just solo DCs versus group practices. And that's very pertinent in what we do because, as we help practices to build up, they're only going to do so much as a solo practitioner. They've got to bring in other providers, bring in other people, and bring a lot more in, in place in order to do that. As you ran your practice, you had multiple chiropractors. Tell us a little bit about where that went.
Yeah, sure. So when I first was in practice, I was doing everything, just like many of you watching this. When you first started practice, you're wearing all the hats, right? Like you're doing all the jobs. I was working the front desk. I was doing the billing. I was, adjusting patients. I was going out and doing marketing. I was running the office. It was a 24/7, 365 gig. And, when you're doing all of that solo, it's difficult to actually, expand.
Right.
You get to a point where you hit the ceiling because there's only so much you can do on your own.
Yeah.
And so we talk about this a lot with the Business Academy. Like at some point in time, you have to strategically buy time, which is, hire the right staff at the right time that will help to scale you. And then eventually what happens is, like for instance, for me, when I joined the Business Academy, I was the only doctor in the office. I had, 4 staff. Actually, it was like 2 or 3 staff. We were seeing around 100 visits a week. I had an out point in that I wasn't converting patients very well. I was like at 35%. It was horrible. And so I needed help with that. And I ended up taking a class from the Business Academy that in the end, my conversions went from 35% to 75, 80%. And it completely changed the dynamics of my office to where all of a sudden I had all these patients starting on to care, and now I had to buy time. I had to hire someone. I had to hire an associate then, to get up and above, to take it to another level. I had to hire that associate, and then eventually I hired case managers that helped with the closing patients on care. But it talks to the group, like in your statistics, I read those earlier, and the average, person working in a group is making more than the person who is solo. And those numbers are horrible, by the way. If you guys have a chance to check out these numbers, they're uninspiring because I don't remember the last time I made that low of income. And I'm not saying this to impress anyone. It's just the facts. Our average clients do much better.
Yeah, well, let me read what these statistics are. So it says, so I'm quoting right here, and it says, the average total compensation for solo DCs this year was $113,142 compared to $137,372 last year. So that means solo DCs went down by $24,000 on average.
Wow.
From 2022 to 2023. But the average total compensation for a DC practicing in a group setting increased from $195,000 last year to $218,000 this year. None of those numbers are great numbers.
They're not great numbers. The fact, if you look at it, guys, if you're doing $200,000 a year, okay, let's take the 200,000 number. You've got 30 to 40% that's going to come off the top right away. You got $80,000 going to the IRS, right? So you're sitting at 120 grand. You start throwing in your housing, your school, entertainment, all the other bills that come with having a home. I mean, that 120 does not go far, And so, I mean, to me, how much are you actually saving at this point in time? Right? And that goes to statistically, nationally, I believe only 2% of Americans are saving money right now.
Right.
So, like, listen, like, if, you know, in my opinion, if your intention is to flourish and prosper, I know I don't want to, and you probably don't want to be in either one of these groups.
Well, no, you don't. But, to the point of this podcast is I think where we're going is, so obviously solo DCs went down significantly in their, in what they're taking home.
Uh-huh.
Now you didn't even mention the fact that all of most of these doctors are still paying back $300,000-$400,000 worth of student loans in that as well, right?
Yep.
But the DCs in a group setting earn significantly more than DCs in a solo setting.
Yep.
And that goes against what a lot of doctors taught in school, right? Keep your overhead low, do what you're doing, kind of go along with this. And there's another datum here that is really significant, which is that the average solo DC spent on average $4,000 for the year in advertising and marketing.
Yep.
$4,000 for the year. That is what, $300-$400 a month?
Yeah.
And the average group practice spent $22,000 for the year in marketing. Now, even $22,000 is low.
Yeah.
It's low.
Yeah.
I mean, when if you're going to be starting to do real marketing, you're going to be doing social media, radio, television, events, all sorts of things like that. And a lot of our clients that are doing much higher numbers than that are spending a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But let's just look at that. So you got a guy who's a chiropractor who went to school. He learned in school that you should keep your overhead low, that you should do, do the basic things, get a small office, get a small staff, kind of go along and do that. And what is that doing for the chiropractic profession?
It's dying.
Right? It's dying.
Yeah.
And so then that guy's not succeeding. But when he then brings on another provider, more staff, more services, more things into the practice, we can see right here, the doctor is personally compensated a lot more.
Yes.
And it's not all about compensation. Yes, obviously it's about that, and you need to live a good life and so forth. But, chiropractors went to school to learn how to help people because most of them were very much personally helped by something.
Yeah.
And so that number there, what they're taking home, is indicative of the revenues coming into the practice, which shows how many people are being helped, how much help is being given, and that's what that looks like there, right?
Yeah, and I think it really comes down to this, like, right, the old saying, like, what you think, right, how you think, like, whatever you learned in school, like, how, what you think and what, is what you say, and what you say is what you do, and what you do is who you become, like, is your destiny, right? So if you're operating off of thinking in like low overhead, keep my overhead as low as possible, like there's this invisible ceiling that exists in your office that you keep bumping up against, and it creates a lot of frustration for providers because they're sitting there, they're stuck, and they're stuck because of the thinking that they have of what they've learned.
Yeah.
And so what I routinely see here at the Business Academy is those hopes and dreams that got someone into chiropractic to begin with, they start to dream again because they see the possibilities of what they can do by thinking differently.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to introduce a new piece of information that you don't have, because the difference between someone who sees 100 visits a week to someone who sees 400 visits a week literally is their knowingness.
Yep.
The person who's seeing 400 a week knows something differently than the person who's doing 100, right? And so it's just really comes down to, learning and getting into an environment where you can flourish and actually start to grow. And I think that, like, for instance, we've talked about this before. Now what's happening is chiropractors are coming out of school $200,000 and $300,000 in debt. So they've learned how to be a clinician. When you ask them, what did you learn in school regarding business? It's very little.
Right.
Very little. And so if you had a scales here and you put all this money into being a clinician and you have no money here in how to run a business, you're off kilter.
Right.
Like, and so what we've seen is that when someone actually starts to learn how to run a business, learns how to put systems in, learns how to hire, learns how to market, how to get attention, actually starts spending 10% of their gross income or 20% of their gross income on marketing, they explode. And when I said earlier, these numbers, these are horrible numbers. And at the end of the day, they could be 3-4 times this just by being educated on how to run a business.
Well, yeah. So our clients here at the Business Academy have much higher numbers than what these are, and are taking home significantly more money. But they're also expanding the practice, and then expanding into multiple practices.
Yeah.
So if we look at this particular subject of going from a solo practice to a group practice, I know you've spoken about this before, and there's a couple of different ways to do this. Is that we typically look at, you've got to hire staff, and I'd say the most important people to put into the practice as you're expanding from that solo DC would be a good office manager, a case manager, and an associate DC. And with those three, I mean, what did that do for your practice when you started putting those in place?
Oh, it really allowed me to expand.
Yeah.
Because what was happening for me is when I was still doing case management, I was doing consults, exams, and report of findings. When I was just a solo DC doing that, my staff would start knocking at the door. Hey, you've got 10 patients sitting here that need to get adjusted.
Right.
And so what happened was, statistically, my numbers were going up and down and flatlining. I got to a certain point and I was flatlining, which is not a good thing. If you're measuring statistics in your office, if you see a flat line, that means you're going to go down.
Yeah.
Right. And I realized I had to bring an associate in. Well, I had to make a decision. Do I bring a case manager in first, or do I bring an associate in first?
Sure.
And I decided for me, and that's different for everybody if you're in that situation. For me, my skill set became very good at getting patients started on care. So I decided I'm going to bring in an associate.
Yeah.
So as soon as I brought the associate in, man, statistically, our numbers started going up. Okay. And then when I hired a second associate, they kept going up because I had a system of bringing patients in and I was closing them on care. And so basically, the more people I had treating patients, I was just filling the pipeline. Like I kept my pipeline full of new patients, which had a system. And then I had a system of closing patients on care. I just needed more associates to help treat the patients. So as soon as I trained them up, numbers just skyrocketed.
And that's a great point. So when you brought the associate in, I know people do this in different ways. What duties and functions did you give to that associate?
The first thing was I wanted to find someone who adjusted very similar to me.
Yeah.
Treatment styles were similar. If not, I was training them on that. At first I had them just shadowing me and watching. So I was apprenticing them on how to ask for referrals or like how to table talk with the patient as they were coming in. I just had them watch for a while, just on like the consultation, the exam, report of findings. Even though they weren't going to be doing the exams and report of findings, I wanted them to know what was happening in there.
Sure.
So that when I taught them table talk, they understood what communication to use and why they were saying what they were saying. But for my associates, I wanted them to focus on being a doctor. Like I wanted them to actually do what they went to school for. Like I had them strictly do mainly like some adjusting, some rehab, showing exercises, maybe helping with some therapies. But I let them be the doctors. And then I hired support staff around them to handle, and they did exams, but I had support staff that helped with consultations and report of findings.
And by doing that, the associate, how many adjustments can they be doing?
Hundreds, couple hundred easy, 300. It really depends on the technique that you are doing. So, if you're spending more time with the patient, you're not going to see as many patients, obviously. But in my office, we did around a 3 to 5 minute adjustment and treatment. And so, our intention was to get that doctor to 10, 12 visits per hour.
Yep.
Some people, treat, that they do, they're not behind a closed door. They're out in the open. They have multiple tables and they're going from one table to the next. And the patient is taught how to, position themselves and be ready for the treatment. And you can see a lot more. That's just what I did. But at the end of the day, when you get an associate in, it opens up your flows to do other things that are not happening in your office. Like, that's routinely what I continually hear.
Right.
Is when a staff member is brought on or an associate is brought on, the owner will be like, I can't believe I was getting any of this done before. And they probably weren't.
Well, and that's what we see with a lot of docs is that they're so busy adjusting and they've got, 25 to 35 hours of adjusting time in the week,
yeah.
Right? And so either they're full-time doing that or they're adjusting and trying to, do other functions in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leaves you with either working 60, 80 hours in order to get everything else done,
Mm-hmm.
and just doing functions rather than dreaming and planning and figuring out, all that goes along with that.
Yeah.
Or, you just stay stuck and there's so many doctors that have plateaued because of that level.
Yeah.
So I think that speaking to this of why does a group doc, DC make more than what a solo DC makes, it's also a very big part of that,
Mm-hmm.
that the things to do in the business of planning, of marketing, of, getting the right staff, training staff, planning for more offices, dreaming, building, all of that can't be done by a solo DC.
No, it's very difficult. I mean, we discussed this before, like, as an owner, when you first start practice, you're obviously the dreamer and the founder. You dreamt up the game. You're a manager, and you're a technician. So when you're adjusting patients, you're a technician. But when you're wearing all three hats, you can build it up in the beginning, but you're going to plateau at a certain point based on your systems. And so at some point in time, depending on what your dream is, that's probably one of the big factors that is missing, I feel, too, is like, I see owners, their goals are so small. They're not big enough, so what happens is, that might have been fine and good 25, 30 years ago. But with inflation, cost of living, insurance reimbursements way down, in my opinion, you've got to be thinking differently in today's environment if you want to help more people, number one, and two, to be able to flourish and prosper so that you can, help your family more than what's currently going on in the profession.
And I feel that beat down of the doctors and that beat down of having a goal that might seem to be a small goal is not what most doctors went to school with a purpose and a drive for. And most chiropractors that I know, when you've hit the system for a number of years and it's kind of gone to that point, maybe they decide that they're going to settle. Maybe they decide that, well, this is good enough and I can survive like this. And, that's kind of how that's going to go. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can get back to those dreams, get back to those purposes. We've got hundreds of doctors that are doing that by training and learning the business and learning the systems and learning all that goes along with that. And now they're able to really flourish in a practice that way.
Yeah. And we see it every day.
Right? Yeah, we do. And so that drive, that inner purpose and that drive is what I personally love seeing. I love seeing it when, a client comes on, they go through some training, they go through this and they're like, hey, I just had a highest ever month. And, previous highest ever was $40,000 for the month. And now, we just did, $80,000 for the month.
Yeah.
And, it's like, wow, there's so much more that goes along with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that's why we're here.
Right.
It's like, it's seeing clients, customers winning.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than, meeting someone who has been stuck for a bit or just wants to expand but doesn't know how, and giving them the tools. And that's probably the biggest difference, I would say, between the Business Academy and other groups that exist out there, is that we're a training. There's no other training company out there. So, we're not just, you come for a weekend seminar and it's a little raw.
Right.
And then you go back to your office on Monday and there you are. Like the old saying, wherever you go, there you are. It's like, we actually put you into training so you learn, you have the know-how, so you can actually go back to your office and produce.
Sure.
That's a big time difference.
Yeah. And then, to the point of this, of where do we go from going from a solo DC to a group DC? First of all, you've got to have enough patients coming in. So you got to look at the marketing, and there's a lot of content that we put out in this podcast. There's a lot of content we put on our YouTube channel, and there's a lot of content at our seminars. And we do a new patient workshop, and there's a lot that goes into what can you do with that. But look, there's plenty of patients out there. There's no lack of patients. Marketing once they're coming in. With that handled, the next step is getting your report of findings going, getting your sales going, in order to get the patients that are coming in and have them be onto enough care so that your office actually starts to fill up. And with that happening, and with more revenue coming in, it's now time to start looking at adding staff, adding services, adding doctors, adding all these different things. And it's really those simple points that kind of go along with that. If you don't have a plan and a goal, and where are we going with that, then you're stuck in a rut. And if you're truly looking at that, we're going to lay out a plan for you. We're going to say, okay, first 90 days, this is where we're going. And how do we get to that point of your goal of getting you into an executive role, or getting you having more time with family, or having you open up your second, third, fourth practice? Whatever that is, that's how we're going to go about doing that. And that is what I would say are the main items that we would go along with to get you to that point. Anything else that you would add to that?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to, getting attention,
Yep.
Having big dreams, getting attention, and then, really understanding how to scale, like understanding that you have to have a system in every single area of your office, so that as you add a staff member, they have their checklist, they have their duties. And when you add someone, the fear out there is, oh, if I add staff, my overhead goes up. But what you need to realize, that when you add a staff, you will make more income.
Right.
You'll be able to help more people. So it's the opposite of what we've been told many times. Because I was told that too. Keep it on a shoestring, low overhead. First 10 years in practice, I did that. I was stuck. But as soon as I learned systems and started hiring and onboarding people, is when my gross income went up extremely in profitability.
Yep. Great. Okay, well, thanks a lot. Thanks for being on, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yep. See you next time.